you for visiting my channel. Tonight I'm going to read something a little different. Instead of a classic ghost story, I'm going to read about 7 entries in a book about haunted locations in Florida. The book is called Haunt Hunter's Guide to Florida. It's by Joyce Elson Moore. It is a wonderful book that includes not just descriptions of the haunted locations, but in each section a terrific little visiting the site note that just makes the whole thing charming. The book is still available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback, and I will put a link to it in the description of this video. I don't have an electronic version of this book, so you may hear some page turning in the background. I don't know whether you will or not, but we will just consider that part of my charming, amateurish reading. The Lear House in Pensacola. The property on which the Lear House now stands, at 214 East Zaragoza Street, changed ownership many times before being purchased by Kate and John Lear, who began construction on the house in 1887. In 1897, it was sold to a ship owner, Benito Rocheblave, and Catherine Elizabeth, his wife. The Rocheblave family lived there until 1912. Although others have owned the house, it is known as the Lear Rocheblave House. It is considered to be an excellent example of folk Victorian or frame vernacular architecture, identifiable by the irregular floor plan and elaborate roof system. It is a 2-story frame house with ornamented porches, noted for the chamfered and bracketed columns. On the second floor, the porches boast a scrollwork balustrade, except for the rear porches, where there are wood railings. The main entrance has a transom and side lights. It is part of the historic Pensacola Village Tour. Haunt history. During the renovation of the Lear House, a painter working on the project saw a woman in Victorian dress dancing in one of the bedrooms on the second floor. He hastily climbed down his ladder and alerted his fellow workers, who entered the house and went up to the bedroom where the painter had seen the woman. They found no one in the room, but according to the workers, there was a strong odor of perfume only in that room. A former visitor to the house related being shown around the house when she visited the family, but never being shown this room, which remained closed during her visit. When students from the University of West Florida were conducting an archaeological dig at the old Christ Church, their equipment and artifacts were stored in the Lear House. Among those were coffins containing skeletons of the rectors, which had been excavated. The remains were stored in the house before being sent to Florida State University to be identified, and after they were returned to the correct coffins to be reburied. The archaeologists left one evening after carefully placing all the bones in the correct order. The next morning they found the door locked as they had left it, but the bones in each of the boxes had been moved around. There was no evidence that anyone had entered the house after the students had locked it for the evening. Strange things happen in the Lear House, but there is no explanation for them. Who haunts this old house is unknown. We only know it is a female apparition who is seen and felt around the house. Who she is remains a mystery. Perhaps it is the former owner, but there is no explanation for her continued presence in this house. Visiting the site. This historic house, like the Door House, is on the tour of historic Pensacola Village. For hours and fees, see the information listed for the Door House. After a day spent enjoying the many faces of Pensacola, plan to dine at the Oyster Bar on North Navy Boulevard. It is recommended by locals and for good reason. The seafood is the best. Waldo's Mountain in Vero Beach. Waldo Sexton was an entrepreneur during the Florida land boom. He came to Vero Beach in 1913 and died there in 1969 at age 82. During his lifetime, he developed citrus groves, a packing house, and a dairy, among other concerns. landmarks around Florida witnessed the impact he had on development. McKee Jungle Gardens, the Driftwood Inn, which expanded around a summer house he built for his family and which displays many artifacts from his lifetime, and Ocean Grill Restaurant all owe their existence to Waldo Sexton. Much of the Vero Beach area is still in trust to the Sexton estate, including valuable waterfront land. His eccentric ways are legend and well documented. He collected treasures and antiques to satisfy his artistic visions. Many of these came from wealthy Palm Beach residents who lost their buildings during the Depression. The most daring and creative of Waldo Sexton's idea was a mountain, a monument to himself at which he wanted to be buried. Its height is not documented, but it must have been sizable because the dirt from that mountain was moved after his death to save the Driftwood Inn from being eroded from years of storms along the coast. The mountain itself had steps going up the side, decorated with inlaid tile. On top were 2 chairs and a cross. He sat up there and viewed his holdings like a king. The pyramid-like monument was built on A1A, where the Ruddy Ducks restaurant now stands. Locals remember climbing the steps of the mountain when they were young. Haunt history. Judy Martin, current owner of Ruddy Ducks restaurant, said it was, ironically, her husband who had moved the soil from the mountain at the request of Ralph Sexton, Walden's son, before Judy even owned the restaurant. The previous owners were so haunted by Waldo's ghost that they asked a priest and later a psychic to free the restaurant of his spirit. The psychic insisted Waldo only wanted recognition. The previous owner, Lolly Husner, said that unexplained things happened. Glasses broke in her hand for no reason. Pictures fell from the wall. An image of Waldo himself was seen once. She planned to erect a miniature statue of him to appease him. Judy Martin said that when she became the owner, she put up pictures of Waldo Sexton in the office. They are still there, along with a picture of Waldo's mountain. In the restaurant, a picture of Waldo is prominently displayed on the bar. Evidently, the honor and recognition that Waldo Sexton wanted has been supplied by the present owner of the restaurant. There have been less frequent happenings, although occasionally Waldo reminds them of his mountain. Once a glass shattered in the bartender's hand as he was getting ready to prepare a drink. Another night, as the owners were closing up for the evening and after they had turned off the lights, they heard a big crash from the kitchen area. Thinking the whole pot rack had fallen, they went back and turned on the lights in the kitchen. Nothing was out of place. "We cannot keep batteries," Judith Martin said. "The remote that controls our music, flashlight batteries, the energy just seems to drain right out of them. Even now we have difficulty keeping batteries in flashlights. We've had other things happen, and I think, am I losing it? Other people would never believe this happened. There's something..." Judith Martin said that when she and her husband leave the premises at night, they remember to say, "Good night, Waldo," or "Keep good care of the place, Waldo." "We don't forget him. I want to be on his good side," she said. The restaurant is built in the form of a ship, with the prow extending over the former site of Waldo's mountain. When the lights that decorate the outline of the prow are switched on after dark, they seem to point up toward the top of Waldo's mountain. He is remembered. Visiting the site. Even if you don't see Waldo's ghost when you visit the Ruddy Ducks, the food is worth the drive. The day I was there for lunch, snapper was the catch of the day. Broiled in lemon butter sauce with perfectly cooked vegetables, it was an unforgettable lunch. Ask for a seat by the water. This restaurant is highly recommended. The Driftwood Resort, built around Waldo's beach house, displays many of Waldo Sexton's treasures, and villas in this timeshare resort can be rented reasonably. It is located right on the water, on Ocean Drive. Ashley's in Rockledge. Ashley's Restaurant and Lounge was opened in 1933 when Prohibition was fading into Florida history. Called Jack's Tavern then, it was an upscale restaurant and tavern whose patrons wore tuxedos and evening gowns. Brevard County's first jukebox was installed in Jack's Tavern, and steaks cost less than $1. It was a successful venture for the owner, but in 1943 he was drafted and sold the restaurant. It was resold in 1946 and named Cooney's Tavern. Clayton Corky's son inherited it and later sold it to Willie Schaumacher, who renamed it the Mad Duchess. 3 years later it was sold again and called the Loose Caboose. Later, Scott Foshner bought it and sold it to Greg Parker, the current owner. Ashley's Restaurant and Lounge is a large Tudor-style building constructed of wood and heavy beams. The quiet lounge area greets patrons entering from US 1. Wood tables with comfy chairs, set off by the dark wood walls, are reminiscent of an English pub. Sunlight streams from skylights, furnishing light to many plants that hang from the ceiling. Upstairs, the tables are placed around the railing, affording a view of the downstairs area. Business people visit frequently for lunch, and it has a relaxing atmosphere. On Football Mondays, it is a haven for sports fans who gather in the lounge to enjoy 99-cent drafts. Haunt history. To be honest, I feel the place is haunted, former owner Scott Foucher volunteered. The incident he remembered most vividly happened when he was there late one night. He felt a gust of wind swish past him. Knowing that all the doors and windows were closed and the air conditioners were so far away from him, he could think of no logical explanation. It was the most overpowering experience, he continued. Many times during his ownership, the police called him and reported lights on and movement inside. When they went in with dogs to check the place, they found nothing. No one. In March 1980, the Rockledge Police Department answered a call. The manager's office looked like a tornado had hit it. There were books and papers scattered everywhere. The safe was open, but nothing had been taken, including some money. The RPD recorded it in their logbook as a suspicious incident. Foucher said that employees avoided the storage rooms as much as possible because several of them had witnessed incidents there. A waitress named Arlene went into the storage room upstairs and came down thoroughly shaken. She said she had seen a woman sitting at the desk. Another waitress, Mary Ann, said she went to the upstairs storage room for iced tea glasses. When she reached up, she extended her leg out for balance and kicked someone. She turned to apologize, but no one was there. Cooks had their experiences too. One morning, a cook found bread baskets scattered all around his kitchen after he had neatly stacked them the night before. George Hepler, another cook, said he saw a jar fly off the counter. Foucher and one of his cooks were preparing for lunch one day, and the exhaust fans, which were controlled by a switch 20 feet away, came on by themselves. The ladies' room seemed to be a target for ghostly occurrences too. A customer came out of the ladies' room one time, screaming that the toilet had exploded. Sure enough, it was in several pieces. A female bartender was combing her hair in the ladies' room when the door opened. When no one came through the door, she thought she had better leave. She pressed the door to open, but could not move it. When she pushed again, the door flew open. Bartenders heard their names called, but when they turned, no one was there. Employees who had to work until closing paid other workers to stay late with them. Ted Innes, a tough-looking dishwasher with tattoos and a hefty build, was frequently chosen to stay late with his co-workers. One evening, a piece of lemon flew out of the sink and across the room, but he said he was never afraid because he had never actually seen the ghost. 2 psychics were asked to investigate all the phenomena. They were convinced that more than one entity was haunting the restaurant on different levels, which gave off confusing impressions. A lot has happened in the two-door building. One of the psychics saw 2 uniformed men drag a man down the stairs, with a young girl begging them to stop. At another session, the psychic saw a woman running downstairs, losing a lot of blood. In 1934, a newspaper reported the brutal murder of 19-year-old Ethel Allen, a regular at Jack's Tavern. Her body was found on the shores of Indian River near Ugali. There were conflicting reports about where she had been last seen. One of 2 possible places was Jack's Tavern. The body was mutilated and only identified by a tattoo, a circle of rope around the initials B.K. on the right thigh just above the knee. It was reported she had been with a well-dressed, nice-looking man. She was buried in Georgina Cemetery on Merritt Island. The police never solved her murder. In 1982, a photographer, Malcolm Denemark, was assigned to take pictures for an article being published in Florida Today about Gentleman Jim's, as the restaurant was then called. After developing the film, he saw an image of a man entering the lobby. No one had come in while he was shooting pictures. There was no shadow cast by the person, although other items in the picture had shadows. The photographer tried to recreate the scene using a person where the image had appeared. The real person did cast a shadow. The National Enquirer bought the picture and ran an article about the restaurant. The Ghostly Register, a book published in 1986, contains an entire chapter on the restaurant. Not knowing the entity's name, there may be more than one, current employees simply refer to the strange goings-on as caused by Sarah. The unusual continues in Ashley's restaurant and lounge. Waitress Kathy Grant said that strange things go on continually. Pictures fall off the wall, 5 at a time, but are found the next morning lying there face up and with no broken glass. Hurricane lamps are lit with no explanation. Does the spirit of Ethel Allen refuse to rest because her murderer was never caught? Or is the ghost perhaps her murderer, returning to the scene of his ghastly crime? Visiting the site. Ashley's is open for lunch and dinner. The peel and eat shrimp are excellent, boiled in spices and served with hot bread. The locals insist that the salmon there is the best around. Rockledge is very near Cape Canaveral and Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. John's Pass at Treasure Island. The bridge at John's Pass connects the more northern of the Gulf beaches with Treasure Island, bound on the east by Boca Chica Bay and on the west by the Gulf of Mexico. To get a good view of the water, park in front of any of the shops that line the entrance to the boardwalk. Small stores, fronted with weathered wood, line the walk on the land side, and on the bay side are numerous seabirds drawn there by regular feedings. There is disagreement among historians as to the nationality of the man for whom the pass was named. His last name has been spelled Levach, Levique, and Levick. He was a turtle hunter and evidently spent most of his time in the area now known as John's Pass. The original bridge was built in 1927. I remember it well. My father remodeled the Kingfisher restaurant, which was a popular dining place for locals and visitors. It was a favored seafood spot for family celebrations. After the current bridge closed in 1971. West of the old one, the Kingfisher closed. Haunt history. In 1862, brothers Scott and John Wittes were returning to their Seminole home after having sailed to Edgemont to obtain food for their families. Because they were considered federal sympathizers, their Confederate neighbors had turned on them, and they were forced to ask for food and protection at Edgemont, a federal outpost. As they were approaching John's Pass, they were ambushed and killed by Southern sympathizers. Their bodies were buried near the pass. The Wittes brothers' spirits have been seen in and above the waters around John's Pass, going to and from their Seminole home site. Sometimes fishermen on the bridge have seen the ghosts gliding across the bay. Visitors to the boardwalk have seen them, explained away by unbelievers as phosphorescent bubbles or neon light reflections. If you are on the boardwalk after dark, look down into the water and across the bay. You may see their restless spirits near the bridge or in the depths of the bay. Visiting the site. Be sure to take your camera because the pelicans will land within a foot of you, sometimes to preen, sometimes just to stare back at your camera lens. A 2-hour cruise, $12 per person, takes visitors to other shores of the bay, affording a view of dolphins and numerous seabirds. The Friendly Fisherman restaurant, on the boardwalk, serves wonderful grouper sandwiches. The restaurant is aptly named as the employees keep an eye out for injured seabirds and call the Seabird Sanctuary for frequent rescues. Boca Grande Lighthouse on Gasparilla Island. Crossing the bridge onto Gasparilla Island is a feast for the soul. Seabirds whirl overhead as if guarding the bobbing fishing boats. The island is a microcosm of Florida. Huge tiled roof estates on the water, modest 1950s built block homes, yachts, and the native fishermen in small boats. Gasparilla Island is one of a chain of barrier islands on the Gulf Coast of Florida, separated from the main peninsula by Charlotte Harbor and Pine Island Sound. In the early days, Calusa tribes, whose presence is documented by small mounds on the island's north end, came there for fish, turtles, and shellfish in the waters. Swimming in the Gulf of Mexico and saltwater fishing in the deep water of Boca Grande Pass bring visitors year-round. Shelling, though, is best during the winter months. 2 picnic areas are located in the park, one at the northern end of the island, the other at the southernmost point adjacent to the lighthouse. Both spots offer panoramic views of the surrounding water. The atmosphere and friendliness of the permanent residents are reminiscent of Florida Keys, in spite of the lavish Palm Beach-type residences clustered along the water. At the southernmost end of Gasparilla Island, in the Gasparilla Island State Recreation Area, stands a wooden lighthouse. It now serves as headquarters for park rangers, and the U.S. Coast Guard operates the light. One of the rangers lives in the assistant keeper's house. Originally named Charlotte Harbor Light Station, the lighthouse was built in 1890 on land that was then part of a military reservation. When a phosphate plant was built at the southern end of the island, ships came from all over the world to load. The lighthouse then became a critical navigational aid for mariners coming into Port Boca Grande. In 1927, the Coast Guard built a taller lighthouse, Rear Range Light, a mile and a half from the old lighthouse, and moved the Fresnel lens to the taller lighthouse. During the next 2 decades, the old lighthouse stood abandoned. At one point, due to erosion around the piers on which it stood, it almost fell into the sea. In 1971, the government deposited 35,000 cubic yards of sand at strategic locations around the lighthouse, which had now been turned over to the General Services Administration by the U.S. Coast Guard. The following year, Lee County had obtained ownership of the lighthouse, and the precarious tilt of the building was corrected. In 1980, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Since then, through grants and citizens' contributions, the lighthouse has been lovingly restored, and the Coast Guard reinstalled the third-order lens and recommissioned the old lighthouse as operational. Haunt history. The old lighthouse and surrounding area have seen many tragedies and many ghostly visitors. Ranger Dave Porter, who grew up nearby, related the story of Jose Gaspar. He kept all his captive women down at Captiva. That's where the island gets its name. Gaspar brought his special one, Josefa, up here onto the beach. This is where she refused his advances, and he cut off her head with his sword and took the head back to his ship as a memento. The headless woman wanders the beach looking for her head. He continued, between 1890 and 1910, either the first or second assistant was so lonely he committed suicide in the assistant keeper's house next to the lighthouse. Michael Cohorn, one of the rangers at the lighthouse, related his personal experiences with perhaps the saddest unexplained presence. One of the keepers by the name of McKinney had a little girl who died of fever. Once I was in the other room, and I had left the door open. I heard a humming coming from the room where the lighthouse keeper's office used to be, facing the water, but there was no one there. The receptionist and assistant lighthouse keeper have heard her playing jacks. They can hear the ball bouncing, and she'll throw the jacks up on the second floor of the lighthouse. Visiting the site. A toll drawbridge crosses the water to Gasparilla Island. Honor parking is observed at the park. The lighthouse has an interesting display of shells, including turtle shells and an empty turtle egg. The taller lighthouse, which for a time housed the lens from the old lighthouse, is on the right as you go south toward Boca Grande Lighthouse. In town, the Temptation Cafe has a very modest exterior, but don't pass it by. The waitress knows everyone because it is where all the locals eat. The grouper sandwich would make anyone come back, and the ample servings in a serene, quaint setting are not what one expects beyond the unpretentious screen doors. Fish recommendations are changed according to the catch and weather. Palm Cottage in Naples. During the end of the 19th century, Naples was still a well-kept secret, a place where northern industrialists could get away from the cold weather without going to Miami or West Palm Beach, which had already had the busy social activities that accompanied the fast-growing tourist resorts. In 1895, Walter Haldeman, publisher of the Louisville Courier-Journal, acquired a large parcel of prime land in Naples, Florida. He purchased the pier, the Naples Hotel, a sloop and a steamer, a house, and 8,600 acres of land for $50,000. He then built the two-story house, which would later be called Palm Cottage. Originally intended to handle guest overflow from the Naples Hotel, it eventually became a home for his editor, Henry Watterson. Now owned by the Collier County Historical Society, it is one of the few remaining homes in southwest Florida which was constructed using tabby mortar. Watterson lived in the house from 1895 to 1912. The serene setting encouraged him to pen many editorials from the library of Palm Cottage. His articles were then taken to the pier a few blocks down the road and sent to Fort Myers, where they were telegraphed to the Louisville Courier-Journal. When writing of Naples, he spoke of the ample venison, pompano, and oysters he enjoyed from this pristine part of Florida. To the fisherman and hunter, Naples is virgin, the forest and the jungle about scarce trodden, the waters, as it were, untouched. Watterson later was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for one of his editorials, which supported the entry of the United States into World War I. Literary talent ran in the family. His cousin was Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. Walter Palmer was the next owner, and the one who gave Palm Cottage its name. He sold it to two Canadians in the 1930s. In the 1940s, Lawrence and Alexandra Brown bought the house. During their ownership, the house was visited by motion picture stars including Gary Cooper, Robert Montgomery, and Hedy Lamarr. It is told that when Brown raised the cocktail flag, the entire community knew it was party time at the Browns. After her husband's death, Alexandra Brown remained at Palm Cottage until her own death in 1978. During Hurricane Donna in 1960, much of Naples was devastated, and Palm Cottage did not escape the wrath of the terrible storm. It was flooded with hurricane tides, but the Browns, along with others who had endured Donna's punishment, cleared the debris and dried out their belongings. Following the cleanup of the town, Naples began to experience a growth spurt. Haunt history. Fritzie Ryan, the executive director of Collier County Historical Society, shared a few stories about the strange happenings in the old house. I've been here about 3 years. At first it was business as usual. She explained that the restoration began about a year after she arrived. The cost of the restoration ran over $400,000. Two of the carpenters working on the restoration continually reported that their tools were moved. They didn't get upset, but just found them and began work again. The workers also experienced cold spots, particularly in the hallway. And what is interesting is that the Browns usually centered their lavish parties in that hallway. I've noticed things too. Things have been moved around. There's no doubt in my mind that spirits exist, and I think it is a nice spirit here. She explained that Lawrence Brown was considered an outcast by his wealthy family in Pittsburgh, who supplied him with an allowance to live in Naples. So he and his wife just lived here and gave parties and enjoyed life, she explained. He had gone to Yale, she said, and had been in the Marines during World War II, but evidently there was some reason his family ostracized him. Ms. Ryan continued, "There was a house next door, on the east side. The owners left one evening, and their 14-year-old son stayed there. It seems he was smoking and fell asleep, burning down the house. The fire spread the upstairs part of the house, essentially burning most of the top story. The boy was killed in the fire. I don't know if he is the spirit." While the misplaced tools and articles may be the work of a young boy, it is also likely that Alexandra Brown, who with her husband spent happy years entertaining celebrities, has remained in the old house and still moves quietly through the rooms, fingering her piano and placing things where she thinks they should be kept. Visiting the site. Tours of the site are given on Monday through Friday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., except on legal holidays. Group tours can be arranged. After the tour, take the one-block walk to Naples Pier and enjoy the calming breeze from the water. When the Gulf air has given you an appetite, go to Trio's restaurant just across 3rd Street. Nestled among a gallery of shops, the restaurant is easy to locate because of its bright blue umbrellas. Trio's menu offers a wide selection of Mediterranean dishes. Try the half salad with grilled shrimp and scallops dressed with a light vinaigrette. The friendly waitresses bring a basket of thin-sliced hot bread to your table with your beverage. And this is the last little story from this section, which I hope you have enjoyed. This is the colors in Key West. Only 1/2 block from Duval Street in Key West, in the heart of Old Town, sits a Victorian mansion that has been converted to a lovely guest house. From one of the upstairs guest rooms, the Key West scene plays out below the balcony. The island of Key West, which could be accessed only by boat before the 1900s, is dotted with houses that reflect many cultures. Colors, with its open porch, ceiling fans, and carved balustrade, is an example of the houses constructed when Key West was home to fortune-seeking wreckers, sea-wreck salvagers, and cigar makers. In 1888, the city directory made note of the fact that Key West pays 19/20ths of the internal revenue collected in the state of Florida, which is largely due to cigar manufacturing. One of these prominent manufacturers, Cuban Francisco Mario, built his house at 410 Fleming Street with profits from the cigar industry. Mario was imprisoned in Cuba during the country's insurrection in 1869. He escaped and traveled to New York City, where he got a job in a cigar factory. After learning the entire process of manufacturing and marketing cigars, he became interested in Key West, having heard from shippers about Florida's island city and its cigar industry. Mario subsequently moved to Key West and built a huge warehouse and 45 cottages for the cigar makers. Revenue from the cigar industry, as well as from his tenants, increased his already substantial estate. In 1886, the Great Fire, as it is known in Key West, lasted 12 hours and totally destroyed the island. Because of the isolation of the Keys, insurers would not insure the wooden houses, which had no water source except cisterns which might dry out at any time. All of the warehouses and stores burned, and thousands of residents were left homeless. The property on which Colors now stands was in the section where the fire began. Mario bought the now vacant lot and built the house on Fleming Street sometime between 1889 and 1890. The large rectangular house with its veranda and twin gables stands out even in Key West. The interior is now divided into guest rooms with private baths, an office, and a common area. The outdoor area centers mainly around the pool, which is surrounded by palms, jasmine, and bougainvillea. Colorful finches dominate the one shaded corner, their colors and carefree attitude reflecting the very feeling of Key West. Francisco Mario died in Cuba in 1891 while he was on a trip to buy tobacco. He left a wife, Henriqueta, and 8 children. Francisca had married Henriqueta in Key West on June 23, 1883. 6 months after his death, Maria Ignacia de Mario came to lay claim to his estate, disinheriting Henriqueta and her 8 children. According to courthouse records, Maria was Francisco's first and only lawful wife and was therefore entitled to all of his estate. Francisco and Henriqueta's 8 children were moved out of the house and left with no income from the sizable estate. Haunt history. "Show us the ghost, Michael," we entreated the handsome young house manager. He left his duties and freely talked to us about his experiences since he had been employed in the guest house. "Well, you don't all seem to have any negativity, so I don't think she'll be around. She makes herself known when there's negativity in the house. Usually what happens, people come in and they already have this feeling. Every once in a while the chandelier will dim intermittently. I always thought it was just a power surge. About a year ago, some people who had reservations didn't let us know they would be late arriving until after 10 p.m. Our office is open from 8 in the morning until 10 at night. They left a really nasty message on the machine. They said, "We'll see you in the morning. We want our money back." We didn't quite understand the whole message. We played it back 4 or 5 times. They showed up about 11 a.m. the next day. They were Spanish women. One had a very heavy Spanish accent, so we conversed in Spanish. We told her we would upgrade the reservation to a better room with a TV and such, and we bent over backwards to make her happy. She kept saying every room was too dark. She said it was creepy. The manager and my other housekeeper were there at the time. At that point, 3 doors upstairs slammed shut, one right after the other. We looked up and saw a shadow and thought, well, the wind did it. The 2 ladies decided they weren't going to stay. It happens like that every now and then. 2 gentlemen in one room had a big argument. I was called out at 3 a.m. and had to make one of the gentlemen leave. Again, strange things happened, with the lights dimming and doors slamming. Once, 2 women were staying in the last room. I didn't meet them the night they checked in, but when I arrived the next morning, the first thing they said was, "What kind of electrical connections do you have on that wall?" I said, "Well, I have fuse boxes and this and that," and explained to them. They said, "Well, there's something in the house. There are children in the house. There's some energy." We were up until 3 a.m. trying to direct the energy to move on. They said there was so much energy that there was no end to it. They were perceptive about what was going on. They loved what had happened the night before and were so happy they had been here to experience it. On my very first day working here, I was doing some yard work out near the pool and I saw something at the kitchen door. I stopped what I was doing to introduce myself to who I thought at first was another employee. I went to the door and walked around the house. There was no one around, so I went back to finish what I was doing, and then I saw the figure of a small child by the Pepsi machine. This was in broad daylight. So I went nearer, and there was nothing. The next day I said to my manager, "What is in the house?" He said, "Are you psychic?" I said, No. Then he gave me the whole history. When the owner of the house died, his wife, Henriqueta, inherited the house. 6 months later, Maria, his second wife, showed up. According to the law in those times, the house went to the first wife, and Henriqueta and her 8 kids got thrown out. The second wife is the presence who is here. She always thought it was her house, and she returned. There is no history of what happened to her after she left here, but 4 or 5 of the kids are buried in the cemetery. My sister, a confirmed skeptic who only came along to help with the camera and tape recorder, was standing next to me listening to Michael. She said, "I was standing here listening to this, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the upstairs window curtain blowing. Look at that curtain." Michael said that although there are a few doors open upstairs in the hallway, that window was not open. My other sister then said she felt a cool draft come down the stairwell right toward us. The upstairs window curtain, my sister insisted, had blown out from the window and halfway across the stairs. How could that happen if there was no wind and the window was closed? Michael shrugged and smiled as if to say these were nothing new to him. He then gave us a tour of the house. He showed us the common area in the pool and showed us where he had been standing when he saw the figure in the doorway and later the child's figure by the soda machine. He also showed us pieces of broken tureens, toothbrushes made of bone, and other artifacts that had been found when the pool was excavated. 2 upstairs rooms, which are now divided, are Henriqueta's quarters. 2 men had once stayed there, Michael said. One of them began sleepwalking. His friend tried to wake him up. As he was walking toward Henriqueta's other room, the sleepwalker bumped into the wall. He said, "I'm following her. I was told to follow her." Michael continued, "At night, I turn down the beds and put a mint on each pillow. Sometimes in unoccupied rooms, I find things different than I've left them. Sometimes I can just feel something on one of the rooms. Just recently, I was cleaning out one of the bathrooms. The house was empty except for Eduardo and myself, and he was making the bed in the next room. I heard the cellular phone ring. You can call room to room, but not outside. I thought it was Eduardo, but he said he hadn't called. Also, we've had many instances of lights going on up in the attic. You need a strong ladder to get up in the opening into the attic. People from across the street will call and tell me, "You left your attic light on," and we haven't been up there in a long time. Last year, I was in the house by myself, downstairs in the basement. No rooms were rented. I was getting supplies, and as I was going through stuff, I heard a voice say, "Michael." I turned around, and again I heard, "Michael." So I left and ran up the steps. I told the housekeeper about it, and she said, "Oh, that happened to Eduardo." At one time, the guest house had been a restaurant. Michael offered that maybe Henriqueta was angry because of this. Also, he added that the operator of the tour train that passed through had used to make mention of Hetty, which is a nickname for Henriqueta. She may not have liked being referred to as Hetty. Most people who have experienced the ghost, however, believe that Henriqueta has obstinately refused to give up ownership of the old house, and that the spirits of her evicted children remain with her. Visiting the site. Rooms rent from December 15th to April 1st and cost from $110 to $185. During the summer, rates are $80 to $135. This includes a continental breakfast. The swimming pool at the rear of the guest house is clothing optional.